Hi, and welcome GAPNA members. We are so very excited to have all of y'all attend our Get the Scoop for the board. This is our first virtual GAPNA webinar from the Nominating Committee. We're also streaming live on Facebook, and this event is also being recorded that it'll be available later for you to review. We hope you have your desserts ready to get the scoop and learn about how to serve and get more information on the GAPNA board. I don't have my dessert, but I do have my coffee, decaf coffee, here to enjoy with all of you as we learn more about members from the GAPNA board. At the end of the presentation from the panelists in the Q&A session, we will have an available area in the Q&A section for you to submit your questions. We'll be reviewing those and submitting them to our guests later in the webinar. I want to say thank you to the Nominating Committee for organizing this event. They have been fabulous. I'm Kim Posey, and I'm chair of the Nominating Committee, and I will be moderating this session. Vicki Knowles is the chair-elect for the Nominating Committee, and Kayla Blakely is one of our members. I'd also like to say a special thanks to Celeste Terrell and Aaron McCartney with the home office of AJJ for supporting this webinar. We couldn't do it without their support. I would also like to introduce other members of our former board members. So before we do that, I just want you to think about, have you ever thought about volunteering? It's really easy to do. We actually have an area on the website where you can sign up. So if you go into and log into GAPNA, if you go into membership and committees, there's an area where you can easily sign up online. So if you're interested, please check it out. For this next upcoming session, we do have different positions available: a president-elect, treasurer, director at large, and nominating committee. The nominations will open very soon, actually March 1st, and it will run through March 31st. Then we'll have elections in May. We will also, the Nominating Committee will host an additional webinar on March 25th. So mark your calendar if you want to hear about other positions and volunteer opportunities within GAPNA. We would love to have you again on March 25th. So now, without further ado, our featured guest, we have Katherine Evans and Carolyn Clevenger. I want to read a little bit about both of them. Katherine Evans is a past president. She's a family and gerontological nurse practitioner, board certified in hospice and palliative care. She's current chief nursing officer for United Healthcare Retiree Solutions. And she focuses on the retiree clinical experience, including leading population health programs, innovation, and achieving the highest quality of care. She was director of the Doctor of Nursing Practice program at Georgia State University prior to joining the United Healthcare Retiree Solutions team. She earned her BSN from the University of Memphis and her MSN from Emory, and finally her DNP from Vanderbilt. She has served as the Georgia GAPNA president and conference planning chair, the National Nominating Committee chair, website editor, and president of GAPNA. She currently serves as the director of the GAPNA Leadership Institute. So we'll be excited to hear about all of her leadership positions within the organization. We also have a wonderful panelist, Carolyn Clevenger. She is a gerontological nurse practitioner and professor and associate dean for clinical and community partnership with Emory University. She's responsible for the Office of Clinical Placements and the Emory Nursing Experience, including Wound Ostomy Continence Nursing Education Center. She is the director and practicing nurse practitioner at the Emory Integrated Memory Care Clinic. The clinic is nurse-led primary care practice for people living with dementia. This new model of care has been recognized as a patient-centered medical home, an age-friendly health system, and an exemplar practice by the Institute of Patient and Family-Centered Care. The clinic boasts the extraordinary high patient experiences scores and has nearly eliminated avoid hospitalizations for people living with dementia. Way to go, Carolyn. She has earned her BSN from West Virginia University, her MSN from Emory, and her DNP from the Medical College of Georgia. She completed her postdoc fellowship at the Department of Veterans Affairs. She served as the Georgia chapter president, the website editor, the president of GAPNA, and she was founder and the inaugural director of the GAPNA Leadership Institute. So thank you and welcome Dr. Evans and Dr. Clevenger. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming here to talk about your experiences with leadership and serving as a volunteer within GAPNA. So let's start with talking about how you got involved with GAPNA in leadership. Dr. Evans, can you give us some insight about that?
Sure. So I started my journey with GAPNA really at the local chapter level and became president of the local chapter and started the local conference. So we had a local conference here in Atlanta every year. So got that off the ground and chaired that conference for several years as well. Then, of course, I was attending the national meetings, networking, getting to know other people within the organization, and participating in different activities. Speaking, I did speak at the conference a couple of years, which helped me to get to know some of the planning committee and other members as well through that. And I think the tap on the shoulder came from one of the GAPNA presidents who came to me and said, I really think you should run for the nominating committee. So I did, and sat on the nominating committee for 2 years, and then ultimately ended up running for GAPNA president. So it was kind of a stepwise journey through different roles.
Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Clevenger, can you share some of your experiences about how you became involved?
Happily. So the Georgia chapter, is relatively young. Well, it feels young to me, but the older you get, the younger things seem. So it started in Georgia by a good colleague and friend of both of ours, Nikki Davis. And I still remember going to some of those early meetings, and it's young because it's actually before I had my youngest child. So really, even in the Georgia chapter in the metro area, it was really a nice networking opportunity. So many people who were either geriatric nurse practitioners or NPs who were working primarily with older adults at this point. You might imagine in the Atlanta area, a lot of Emory folks. And, that's the thing about the geriatric specialty is that it's a fairly small community. And, you're with friends who understand our work and understand why we love it so much. That was my first foray, really was through my local chapter, even as early as it was. And then very quickly joined Katherine and Nikki and others from our chapter at some of the national meetings. Then I became obviously more involved in our local chapter, also with the conference. I think the conference, maybe the first year might have been maybe the year before I was chapter president, or maybe that next year. So really worked closely with a small knit group here locally, but again, enjoyed being part of the larger conversation at annual meetings. And then I think I went to an event maybe for chapter presidents. And I remember being at the leadership tea, which is something we used to do in the president's suite. And I remember where I was standing in the room and someone said, hey, we've been thinking, what do you think about doing some more participation on one of our committees? and it was the communications committee, specifically the website. And so I started working with that team and with that larger communications committee for a couple of terms, and then ultimately ended up doing national board. But really plugged in very closely with my local group, and the Georgia girls still hang pretty close.
We know they are a big group within GAPNA. And that's one of the things that I love about GAPNA that you mentioned, especially when you go to a national conference. And even if you don't have a local chapter, GAPNA has just been so welcoming to everyone. And you just feel right at home. And it's your group of that, like you said, tight-knit community of geriatric practitioners. So next question is, I know there's when you volunteer and you do these things and someone taps you on the shoulder or asks you, hey, let's take the next step. What really surprised you the most about taking that next step? Dr. Evans, can you elaborate on that?
I would say how much fun it is. I mean, it is hard work, but it is very rewarding work. We have a good time, and in all of my roles, I've made new friends, made new connections, not just professionally but personally, and those have been invaluable. I would say our Georgia chapter, we're all very close and spend a lot of time together, and beyond that, I think of GAPNA as my family. I like to refer to it as, these are my people. They get me, they understand my practice, what I care about. Not many people understand and appreciate the love and passion of caring for older adults. And this has just been a fun journey. I think the other piece is how much of what I have done with GAPNA really translates into my work. And so we often think of professional service as service to our profession, and that it's only service to the professional organization. But those skills are really translatable into the workplace. So the things I learned about managing meetings, interprofessional relationships, how to deal with vendors, how to have difficult conversations sometimes, how to manage things from end to end, all of those skills really did serve me well in not just my professional life, but personal life too. So, lots of ways those skills were really beneficial throughout other arenas.
Thank you for sharing that, as well as how serving just really makes that full circle of your professional and professional life and personal life, and really enhancing both of those. Dr. Clevenger, what was your big surprise?
I would say the full understanding of what an organization like GAPNA can do and the reach that it has. For me, I really appreciated, when you're at that board level, even when you've been part of a committee for a period of time, to really see the full scope of all of the things that our members are accomplishing. I think we're a sizable organization, but we're not like the biggest, and but we have such a committed group of volunteer members who are connected across a lot of different networks and a lot of different industries in different specialties. And I think that was really maybe a bit surprising, but very exciting, I think, about what the future of geriatric nursing could be. I think I will say, I'll add on to what Katherine was saying in terms of my own professional well-being and skills and tools that you learn in terms of being in a leadership role. I would echo everything that she said, absolutely true for me individually. I think the other thing that I found was that, I'm an academic. I think it's really nice to have a board mix of folks that are academics and are practice leaders. I think that makes a much more robust leadership team overall. But in the academic space, some of the things that we do depend on reputation. And so it ended up being really valuable, not just to me, but actually to my boss, to have me in a role at that level in a national organization in my specialty. And so certainly I did not mind the extra brownie points for having that kind of role come back to me personally at work.
Excellent. And I really like how you talked about the diversity of the members. And I think that's really important that we have diverse experiences and diverse backgrounds, because that only makes the organization stronger. And I think it's important for those that are thinking about volunteering, knowing what your strengths are in those diversities and knowing that you do have something special to offer GAPNA and the members with our different differences and our diverse members. So that's really important. So, volunteering, it takes a lot of time. People think, how can I do that? I've had the COVID, I teach, I work, I have a family. So the next question a lot of us think about is, my goodness, how did you balance all of this with your roles, your professional life, your personal life, and your volunteer role? Dr. Evans, how did you do it all?
Some days better than others. I would say in terms of the role, it depends on the role you're in at a given time as to how much it takes, right? So, and some of these things are very time limited. So for example, the Georgia GAPNA presidency, I did that for a couple of years, and that probably took, I probably spent several hours a week working on different things for that role. And as events would come and ramp up, there would be more time. Same with planning committee for the conference. So, things happen in bursts of time. So you may spend, 5 or 10 hours a week for several weeks. And then once everything's planned, there may be some downtime after that. Needless to say, being president was the most time consuming. Most board positions do require at least a couple hours a month of just board meetings, and then you are a liaison to different committees, so that's another hour or two a week. And then as president, of course, you have some additional hours of meetings with the national office and other partners, whatever that may be. And again, depending on the time of year, some things ramp up a little bit more than others. So in terms of balancing it, I think it's just about organization, and you got to figure out your time management, making sure that certainly there were times when I had to give things up. There were things I couldn't do that I may have wanted to do or could do at a later time. The beauty of being a past president is that I get to do what I want to do for the organization and I get to pick and choose. So that's the most fun now, is having the ability to choose those special projects and work on different things. But yeah, it is tricky sometimes, and it can be a struggle. And there were weeks when I was really tired. But I would say overall, all in all, it was very much worth it. And would echo what Carolyn said about just that I had that same experience with my boss too, around that prestige of the position. And people really do appreciate and understand and recognize that you're on a national board, and often will give you some allowances around that time as well.
Those are great tips. And it's nice to hear that many of your professional, your job, that they understand the time commitment and how important that is to give back. Dr. Clevenger, being in academia, that's also very time consuming. So how do you balance that plus your clinic time with being a volunteer?
Yeah, I think nurses often get told this, or have this idea, like you can do it all, and then we get a little overwhelmed. And so I always remind people, you can do it all, but maybe not all at once. And so like Katherine, I think there were some things that I just needed to trade off for a bit, knowing that my time on the board was time limited, and it was really important to me. And I think that gets to this, the notion of, you spend time like you spend money. You prioritize what's important to you and where you want to spend your time. And so I didn't mind to add the extra time. She's right. Everything from obviously board meetings, preparation for board meetings, presidents have this president's call and time with national office, liaisoning to different committees, and doing, work on special projects. That's time that you're willing to spend, because at that level, in these leadership roles, that time invested is going to make a difference. There's going to be some positive yield on it. So to me, it was a significant enough result that I was willing to invest the time in it. But I didn't do it for 6 years for a reason. So 3 years was sort of the right amount of commitment, and I was happy to do it. I think a lot of us think like I have a lot of things on my plate. I want to make sure I can commit the amount of time that it needs. But I would also remind you guys, everybody here knows you want something done, you give it to busy people. So we know how to manage time because you get a lot of practice doing it. And somehow you sort of, you figure it out. You make some prioritization, you make some decisions about what will and won't be within your constraints. And then we make it happen.
Well, I appreciate both of you sharing your tips and pearls of how to organize your time and volunteer and to make it all happen. And of course, the importance of that, for the organization. And of course, for our main mission of caring for older adults. And that means a lot to all of us because as Katherine said, these are our peeps and this is our home and the people that get us. And I love that. There are a lot of opportunities to volunteer within GAPNA. Some people may not want to be on the board. We have committees also that are wonderful opportunities. And I want to hear more about like the Leadership Institute and other ways that you think would be great avenues for people to serve.
I'll take this one first, if you don't mind. So I think the Leadership Institute came out of a couple of different conversations that we had, including in the leadership meeting that the board has with committee chairs and chapter leaders at the beginning of conference. And several folks were commenting on that. I think the challenge of identifying people who wanted to step into these roles, who felt comfortable and confident in doing that. And also some of our own sort of lived experiences in our own chapter and then committees and the board. And one of the opportunities we thought would be really helpful for people at various levels is to spend some time focusing on grooming some of those leadership skills. And so we put together the Institute. It's more or less a year long. Each year there is a group. It may not last an entire year. This year's, of course, different, like everything with COVID. And the director of that institute is one of our past presidents. I would anticipate will always be someone who has been a president of a national organization in nursing, even if we're ever move outside of GAPNA. And they're mentors, so they're mentors for each of the fellows who are past board members or who have leadership experience. I said a long time ago, sometimes you make quotes for magazine articles and you cringe when they use the quote, but we were doing an article on leadership in nursing, and I made a comment like, it's really hard to learn leadership from someone who hasn't been a leader. Like you learn from leaders who have done it. And I think that's what the Institute does really well. So there are clear objectives. There's a sort of list of topics. Each of the directors might approach those topics in terms of how they teach them, how they help you develop those in those areas, however they would like in terms of their own background and teaching styles and preferences and experiences. But at the end, everyone sort of finishes meeting those core objectives. And I think it's similar to what Katherine and I have valued from our own experience. Developing additional leadership skills contributes not only to our organization, to GAPNA, for you sort of in your professional reason, those skills translate into your own career. And so I think hopefully people are finding that that's been the case. Each of the fellows conducts a project while they're with us that's supported by their mentor, and the project might be for GAPNA or might be in their own workplace. But again, it's hard to just get this content by reading, watching, listening, and engaging in conversations if you don't also have an opportunity to practice some of the skills that we talk about. So that is at the moment, we're in year 2. We're in our second cohort now. Katherine obviously is the current director. And it has been so far, we've identified folks from our board members who have seen maybe people who've been active in their chapter level, who've shown some interest, who've been invited to participate. We will get quite soon, I would imagine, to a place where individuals are able to self-nominate or apply to be part of that. It's not pre-required. It's not prerequisite to being in one of our elected positions, but we certainly hope it prepares people who maybe want to feel a little more comfortable and confident in their skin to do so.
Great, thank you. And so Katherine, as you, the current director of the Institute, so can you talk about what you're doing and what other tips can you give our participants on volunteering outside of maybe the board?
So, I mean, the Leadership Institute is amazing, and it certainly is preparing our next generation of GAPNA leaders and nursing leaders. I think that it's a great step. It's not a necessary step. So, as Carolyn mentioned, it's obviously a small group of people. So we're going to need more than just what we have in that particular pipeline. I think there's a lot of different ways to get that experience without having to go through the Institute. And so it's really leaning on mentors within GAPNA, finding those people that can spend some time with you and help you as you go through your own career path, and figure out what interests you within GAPNA. Looking to the committee chairs, working with the committees, seeing what might be something that's valuable. We have several committees that are very active, that are, our education committee is constantly writing and putting out papers, and our health affairs committee is very engaged in policy. So the opportunities are really endless with the different committees and SIGs in terms of getting engaged there and getting the experience, and just building on those skills that once you get to the board, you're more comfortable because you have knowledge of who some of the players are within the organization and how things operate. And so it kind of gives you that basis before you take the next step.
Great, thank you. We truly do stand on the shoulder of giants, don't we? For sure, I definitely can agree that we have some wonderful committees. I'm also on the Health Affairs Committee, point for them, an excellent committee to be on, a lot of great work there. So I appreciate everything that you had to tell our participants. Do you have any just last words of wisdom for them before we open it up to our question and answer? Dr. Evans, any last words?
Oh, sorry, I was going to let Carolyn talk.
That's sorry, I called you out first.
I would say last words is, it's not as scary as it sounds. I think in abstract, it feels big and difficult and, time consuming, and am I ready for this? And I would say, if you really want to ask questions and think it through, but at the same time, we have a lot of great people here to support our board, and the board is always a very tight group of people. The board members are always supporting one another, learning and teaching each other. So it's not as overwhelming as you may think. And once you have some time in the organization, you'll get to see that.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Clevenger, what pearls do you have, or last words?
So I would say, if you have looked at people who are on the board or who have been on the board and thought, well, I don't have as much experience as that person, or I'm not an academic, or I don't have that particular certification, of all the ways that maybe you don't fit what you think the mold is, please don't let that be something that gets in your own head around not participating. The group appreciates diversity. Our organization at large will do better with a wide range of people with various levels of experience, different ages, in a variety of ways. And so don't let that I'm not like those people be part of your mindset about this. Don't ever think that. Everything Katherine said is absolutely right. You learned so much. It's been such a good group. I will tell you, when my first year on the board as president-elect, I was one of the few people who had kids at home. So young kids, right? And with that, there was a couple of things that came up that I said, what do we think about this? And the group was very open to working with me, and things shift based on who's on there, and just in terms of like logistics. So I would say, think less about the type of person you think should be on the board. We want you, right? We want your time. We want your opinions. We want your thoughts. We want your experiences to be part of leadership of the organization. So if you're different, good. We hope you are, and we welcome it.
Great. I love that. Thank you, Dr. Evans and Dr. Clevenger, for being here and sharing your experiences and the importance of volunteering. We now would love to hear some questions from the attendees. So what questions do you have for them about volunteering or their experiences? Maybe it's, is there travel? Is there financial cost? What questions might you have that we could answer for you? Again, it's not a rocky road, right, to volunteering. This is the scoop, and it's easy, actually a much easier road than you think. I know we're also streaming on Facebook Live, and some of y'all may have some questions, and so we're also monitoring Facebook, and we'll answer any of those. While people are looking at questions, so I have a question that I'd like to ask you guys too about it, just for me personally, as being someone that's volunteered and kind of took that step out of the comfort zone and going into the nominating committee. People are also can be afraid of, like, well, I may not get elected, or maybe I won't be the one. And so, it's always a scary thought thinking about that. So how do you talk to other people about volunteering, especially when it's an elected position, about taking that step?
Well, it's always a risk when you are going. In fact, when I ran for president, I was convinced I wasn't going to win. I ran against someone that I adore, and I thought that she she ended up later becoming president. But I really didn't anticipate that. So, but just running isn't just taking that step is an experience in and of itself, and it puts your name out there, right? So it gives you some exposure. It lets people know you're raising your hand, and if for some reason that year is not your year, there's always another year.
Yeah, or there might be things that come up. I mean, if the organization knows that you're interested in leading, that they may invite you to do or to support. That is true, Katherine. You don't know who you're running against until the ballot goes out. So there's always that time when you're like, oh, and I also had someone on the ballot who I think the world of her. And honestly, she ended up running again, and things worked out just fine. Not in GAPNA, but in another organization, more local. I ran against someone whose first name is also Carolyn, and last name also starts with a C. And so I've said for years, I really do believe this. I'm like, I'm not entirely sure that I actually won that election. I think people didn't quite know which one they were voting for, because they kind of knew of us, right? But they didn't really know us. Anyway, for both of us, it works out just fine.
That's funny. Thank you. Yeah. So I agree that, just by the act of putting yourself out there, I mean, it's stretching you professionally and personally doing that. And it's a growth opportunity. Even if it doesn't work out this time, it's still a win. It's a win-win for everyone, because we need all of that diversity and having more than one person be on the ballot. So thank you so much. We do have a question about, if you went back and did the presidency again, is there anything you would do differently, or would you approach it differently? So Dr. Evans, the floor is yours.
Wow, that's a great question.
Meg first.
I think that's from one of my mentees too. So I would expect nothing less from her than a great question. But I think differently. I think that as in everything else in life, just sitting back and enjoying the moment a little bit more. I think it's easy to get caught up in the stress and things that are happening and things are moving fast. But just taking time to appreciate the journey, I think is probably one of the things I would think about differently. I don't regret a minute of it though. I love every bit of what I did.
Thank you, Dr. Clevenger.
So I was going to say, first of all, I wouldn't do it again though. And it's not because I had a bad experience. I think it's because it's really important to me for other people to have their opportunity. So this is the thing about this organization that I've just enjoyed. So remember, in the president's role in particular, you have this president-elect, year president, and past president. So there's a built-in formal structure for people to be passing on lessons learned. And in fact, I would say I was a recipient of some lessons learned or some advice from the person ahead of me. I think I gave Katherine some things that I was like, what really needs to happen next is this. And then of course she was able to carry that torch. So there were some special projects that were started by Pam Cascione, in fact, that we're still working on. But we conducted, gosh, I guess it was 2016 at this point, but around understanding our membership and where folks are and what kinds of practice they're doing. That came out of a president's call and a conversation that we had that then we did with her, and we're able to move forward. And she had said to me, the strategic plan is getting kind of dusty. It's probably time to refresh it. And so then I was able to focus on that. And then, there were things I think that I had said to Katherine, like, it would be really good. Well, there's the Leaders Institute, which happened after both of us. But having this, you said we stand on the shoulders of giants. We have this long line of GAPNA presidents who, especially those who have recently been in that role, are happy to pass things along. And there's a continuity built into the way we've organized things. So if there's something that you say, I really wish we would have focused on this because it seems timely, someone is coming along that's going to do that. So I think that's been, it was kind of exciting, honestly, and maybe a bit comforting to me stepping into that role. Obviously, you have some things that you think are important, but you're also being supported by people who have just been in that role a year, 2 years, 3 years ahead of you, who are saying, here are some things that you really might want to focus on, and here's some context for it. I think, for example, like I really started thinking about our relationship with other organizations that were similar. Maybe we shared members and shared interest and wanted to align those better. So the year that I was president, I remember writing things out on a whiteboard and really thinking about that. Frankly, it was Katherine who did a much better job than I did in that following year, reaching out to those organizations and establishing stronger relationships and ties to them. And I don't regret at all that wasn't me, right? I'm really glad that the next person did that. And it's because to our benefit, frankly.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we have some great ties, AMDA being one of those. And I think Katherine was probably pretty instrumental with that organization, which has been which I'm a member, and I think Vicki too. So it's been a nice blend of organizations. One more question is, do you think there's a minimum time members should serve before running for a board position?
That's an interesting question. I know there are some organizations of nurse practitioners where that's really required. And I can see why. There are certainly pros and cons to having time in different levels of the organization. You have more familiarity, maybe. And you have maybe a stronger network to call upon when you are in that leadership role and you need to be reaching out to people to support some initiatives that you have in mind. There's also, though, this notion of, and this is just me personally, I'm a big believer in having fresh thinking, fresh ideas. And sometimes when you've been in on a particular committee or in a leadership role and entrenched for a long time, it gets uncomfortable to think about things differently. So I think for me, and I'll let Katherine answer in terms of what she believes about this. I love to see a mix of people who are relatively new not brand new to the organization, and people who have been around a long time who have that context and the historical context of, when somebody new comes in and says, why are we doing it this way? There may be a reason for how we got here. Doesn't mean we have to stay, but it's helpful to know. So that's just me. I can see pros and cons of both.
Dr. Evans?
I would agree that yes, it's nice to have diversity of experience within the organization. I think it depends on the person. So in the same way that what you learn and grow and the things you develop within GAPNA, you can learn and grow and develop in other places and bring those skills to GAPNA. So you may have been, president of another organization, or really engaged in your workplace in a lot of different leadership roles, and those experiences come easily to the organization. I do think it's important to have some familiarity. So having been a member, having been to the conferences and been involved and engaged, I don't know that there's necessarily a one-fits-all approach to how much time you need in different positions across the organization before you run for board. And I think that's part of what the nominating committee is there for, is to have that conversation with people, to say, if you're not sure, call and say, hey, I'm interested. This is my background. This is my experience. Do you think I'm ready? Or do you think I need to do X, Y, and Z first? And if the people on the committee aren't clear, there's always other people on the board to reach out to, or really across the organization. So it's definitely a valuable conversation to have with some of the leadership.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yes, the members here of the nominating committee, if you have questions, we are definitely here to answer those, to support you, and to help you and plug into the place that's best for your skill set or your needs, or what you would like to do for volunteering or leadership. On the website, you can find our emails for myself, Kim Posey, or Vicki Knowles, or Kayla Blakely. We definitely are here to support you with any questions. I think that might be all of our questions. And again, thank you so very much for spending your evening and enjoying your dessert, which you didn't get to eat. So maybe you have one, later when you get off, to spend time and answer everyone's questions. I know this was valuable, and so I really appreciate it.
This was a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thank
Thank you so much.
And I think if we could share our screen, I think we have one last slide to share with you guys. We are going to have another webinar. The next one that we'll do will be a panel of some past board members. So if you want to know more, please join us on March 25th at 7 p.m. Eastern. We will again learn more and have some fun, have a Q&A session. Again, we have these nominations that will be open pretty much the entire month of March. We will then have the elections that will be happening in May. So really start thinking about what you want to do, what kind of skills and things you have to offer, and where you would best fit in for volunteering and being in leadership opportunities within the organization. GAPNA is very supportive of you and want to also help your professional goals and make some things happen for you. So reach out to us if you have questions. And thanks again to the nominating committee. I really appreciate you putting together this webinar for all of our members. We hope that you have a great evening, and we'll see you again on March 25th. Thanks, and have a good night.